McCord Henry shares with us his journey through alcohol addiction. His life out of college was a series of interventions, failed attempts at sobriety, and moving from city to city as his addiction spiraled out of control. It wasn't until he found himself hospitalized with delirium tremens that he was able to begin the journey of living his life recovered. McCord's story reminds us that our struggles are profoundly real, and whatever those struggles may be, the victory does not come until we are ready to own the outcomes and circumstances of our lives and do battle with the dark places within us. And when that prayed for time does come to step into a new direction, we must have the courage to say, as McCord did, this is it, this is the moment, and seize life. Hello, and welcome to another installment of At the Podium with me, Patrick Huey. At the Podium is a platform where we will learn from people who come from different walks of life, careers, and experiences who all share one thing in common. They have stepped fully into the transformative power of saying yes to the unexpected turns of their lives, and they are now using the power of their voice or podium to make an impact on the world we live in today. At the Podium is the intersection of art, culture, and big thoughts wrapped up in good, old-fashioned conversation. Today, I'm thrilled and humbled to share the podium with McCord Henry. Born the youngest of 4 children in Charlotte, North Carolina, family and church were a significant part of McCord's life. His father was a pastor of a megachurch, and McCord participated in youth groups and mission trips throughout his junior high and high school years. It wasn't until he entered college that McCord made the decision to come out to his family, which he describes as a life-changing moment. McCord graduated from the College of Charleston in South Carolina with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration and a minor in Film Studies. In his senior year, he served as the president of his class, where he led the executive board and was invited to speak at the school's spring commencement ceremonies. It was not until he graduated that his addiction to alcohol began in earnest. Over the next 7 years, his life would become a series of attempts to find sobriety, but alcohol consumed his life. Even a stay at a sober house could not help him address his addiction. It wasn't until a life-altering experience in 2017 that his life changed, and he has not had a drink since that time. In the 4 years of being sober, he has seen his career in the luxury hospitality sector flourish, and he now runs marathons in support of organizations that support people on their journey to sobriety. In looking at his life today, McCord says, 4.5 years later, 4 promotions, 2 marathons, and a move to New York City, I am the happiest I have ever been. My life has focus and meaning. Before we hear from McCord, I want to invite you to share at the podium with the people in your lives. If you find our conversation today helpful, and I hope you will, take a screenshot and share on your Instagram and tag at the podium_Patrick Huey. Or if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook, share our links there. Your shares, likes, and 5-star written reviews help grow our audience and move us up the charts. I am grateful for your support in this capacity. Okay, McCord, welcome to At the Podium.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I've really been looking forward to speaking with you because so many people suffer with addictions themselves. And we all know someone who is currently fighting an addiction or has been fighting an addiction. And I think your story can give people so much hope that there is a way out.
Thank you. I hope so. It's a personal story that I struggled with, obviously, but my goal with sharing and being so open about my struggles and my sobriety is to, cast more light on this subject. I think there's a lot of different paths to sobriety and there's not a monopoly or a right way to do it. And for me, anonymity was difficult. So I wanted to kind of do my own thing. And the more darkness and shame I put on myself for this subject, the harder it was for me to cope. So by declaring it as a not necessarily a negative, but just a truth of mine is one way that I shed light on it. And the more I talk about it and the more I discuss it with others, the more normal it seems. And it's not so scary and not so daunting.
We talk to a lot of people who've gone through drug addiction, alcohol addiction, prescription drug addiction. And the one thing that we talk about is that there's so much shame for the person going through that. But there's a real healing power for them and a learning vocabulary for us when that person can step forward and say, this is my story. This is what happened. It's a beautiful testimony.
Yeah, I agree.
So I want to just jump right in with you. You were the president of your class. You have strong family roots. There were career opportunities available to you. Why did you drink? And why did it become an addiction for you?
So I'm glad we're starting off light. I'm kidding. The alcohol for me was always just like a part of my life. I drank through college. I would consider myself a normal drinker. Normal is a loose term when you're in Charleston, South Carolina, because everyone drinks like a fish there, myself included. So, I was kind of surrounded by it. It was part of my culture. My alcoholism really turned into a full-fledged addiction after I graduated college. In college, I felt like I had a direction and a clear focus and a goal, and you're with like-minded individuals and you're all learning and growing and, experiencing the same new experiences together. And that kind of veered when I graduated college. I took a job as a inside sales analyst in Charleston, South Carolina. And the main reason I took a job was for a relationship. I found someone and moved back to Charleston. And so I wasn't really happy in my career. And therefore, the only happiness I really got was from my relationship and my friends and my, socializing life. And when my relationship suffered or my friendship suffered, it led into everything. And I really started drinking because I wasn't happy with myself. And I started drinking to escape instead of enhance any sort of situation. And that's when it really became a focus of my life and turned from just a part of it to really, it was an ongoing constant.
And what did it give you when you drank?
Escape. It gave me a sense of numbing. It kept the demons at bay. And I felt like I was, a lot of people drink to make themselves outgoing or, social lubricants or, whatever you want to say. I really just drank because I wasn't happy with myself. I moved to Los Angeles to kind of put a Band-Aid on the situation. I wasn't happy. I thought, chasing a dream of working in film and casting would solve the trick. So I moved to LA and pursued a career in film casting. And, when you have a pretty intense drinking problem in Charleston, maybe don't move to Los Angeles and become a bartender. It was not a great life decision, but I ended up cashing out my 401k, running myself into a stupor. And my drinking went from, I was kind of functioning in Charleston to every day was, waking up to drink. I really drank because I was depressed, not happy with myself, because I couldn't stop drinking. And it just became my life.
As you're going through this really serious problem, where were your close friends? Where were your family? How were they dealing with this with you?
So my family and my friends were where I had kept them, which was at bay. I moved to Los Angeles to pursue a dream, but I also fled my current situation and my family and my support system to do that. They reached out. They were trying to be there. My brother came and visited me. I was living with another brother's friends, but, I told them everything was fine. And that's kind of a recurring theme that, I was out west, far away, and just detached emotionally and physically. And it was kind of easy to keep them in the dark. I was super busy with work or whatever reason. And, they tried to reach out and to help and, intervene. I've had interventions. I went to a family wedding in Atlanta, and that's when they really realized that there was a severe problem. Knowing that they were there was always comforting, but I didn't want them to know me as I was because I wasn't happy with who I was.
Why weren't you happy?
Because I was embarrassed. I couldn't, it was so, Patrick, it was, I'm looking back on everything now, I wouldn't change anything. I think everything happens for a reason, but my addiction was so severe that there was no question as to whether or not I could handle alcohol. I see a lot of people in my industry and in New York and Baltimore, kind of everywhere, that can handle and kind of walk the line of, maybe I'm drinking too much, maybe I'm not. From my experience, there was just no question. Like if you saw me, I couldn't hold a tray steady enough and like serve a martini glass as a server because my hands were just shaking so bad. So in a lot of ways, I'm really grateful that it was that severe, just because the choice was made for me. It was either I had two options, either get sober or die or go to jail, three options, I guess. But when I was in that dark place, no one could reach me. I didn't want to be found. I just wanted to be left alone and left with my own devices. And I was just such a miserable person. And I'm sure I was fun and nice. I don't think that's ever changed in some instances, but I did not want anybody. I try and find pictures of myself from that time, and I really can't find many because I would just shy away from everything, limelight, camera, and all of it. So
what happened on April 3rd, 2017?
So it's kind of that whole month of April, or March into April, was just kind of a pretty quick decline, if you will. I had moved, long story short, that was the second time I got sober, because the first time I got sober was in LA, and I went to intervention, went to a sober living house, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But March 3rd, 2017, I woke up, and I had a week earlier, had gotten written up at work for falling asleep on the job, for being drunk. There was documentation and footage of me in the office just like sprata on the floor. My boss sat me down. My boss actually at the time was 17 years sober. And so he knew what was going on with me. And he sat me down. We had a write up and was like, McCord, what's going on? Like, what is going on? And I was like, John, I'm just not doing too well right now. And I always blamed. There's always something to blame. There's some instance, some reason that you can come up with for the way that I was. It was never my fault, and I was like, John, I'm not doing well, and he asked me if I wanted to see the photo of me on the floor. And I was like, no, I do not. I had the next day off, and I drank the whole day, and I woke up the next morning. That was like a week before April 3rd, and called in and quit my job. I just quit. I don't really remember anything from that week after that. I know that the HR department had called and reached me, or to try to reach me, and they got me a hold of me, and I was like, I'm fine. And then they kind of went away the next day. And then the rest of that week, I really don't remember anything. I do remember delirium tremors, which is like a very severe hallucination if you're withdrawing from alcohols, because that will kind of stay with you. But I think I attended an AA meeting drunk as well. And I woke up on April 3rd, and I just was done. I was done. I called my brother, Thomas, who lives in Maryland. And I remember being outside smoking a cigarette and just like not being able to hold the phone still, and just being like, I don't know what to do. And he was like, go to the hospital. So I went to the ER. I ordered an Uber, walked in, and just said, I'm suffering from alcohol withdrawals. And they had this really amazing, actually, facility in Santa Barbara. That's where I was living at the time. And went upstairs and successfully detoxed. And 5 days later, on April 9th, I walked out of the hospital, and I haven't touched it since.
The part that is heartbreaking to listen to your story, is that it feels like there was no one there to help you.
Yeah.
And that's the part I think that struck me when I was reading the information you sent me, is that it felt like this journey, and maybe this is the journey of addiction, is a very lonely journey until you can find your way through it. Is that accurate?
Accurate physically. Yeah, I definitely, in Santa Barbara, I had no support system. I had moved from Seattle, and I had good friends there, still have good friends from Seattle. My old roommate actually was just in town this week, and it's so like seeing her and see me now is just like such a great excitement. She like kind of got emotional. To answer your question, like, no, there was no one physically in Santa Barbara, but you say heartbreaking, and I am so thankful for that reason, because I don't know if it would have gotten as bad as it would have been if I had support system there. Like the reason it got so bad was because I was alone, and I put myself in that situation. I knew moving to Santa Barbara and taking this job from Seattle, where I had friends and people that I loved, and after I had moved, as far away from my family as I could go, I did all those things on purpose because I was pushing them away. I'm so grateful that I did that because I don't think it would have ever gotten as bad as I needed it to be. Like I needed it to get that bad in order to wake up. I woke up in Santa Barbara. I hadn't even installed I slept on like a twin mattress on the ground and woke up that morning. There was empty bottles, all like I'm very OCD and organized, like everything has a home now. And looking back on that room, that dark room with like vomit in the corner and bottles everywhere. It's just like, I don't think I would have woken up had I not been that bad, you know? And so it's looking back on it and reliving it and going back there, which I every April 3rd is my sober birthday. So that like whole like 2 weeks beforehand is a very just kind of like, not dark, but just reflective time of my life every year, just because I kind of go back there mentally kind of every day and think about it. And I've had a lot of time to process it, you know, and I'm so grateful that I was isolated and alone because I think I always would have had someone to kind of help me up and kind of get through, and I would not have ever gotten as bad as I needed it to be.
Who is your support now? Who do you have when the hard times come up, when it's not so great and bright? Who supports you now?
My family is the first one people I call. My mom and I are super close. My brother, Thomas, Ashley, honestly, my whole family's great. You know, we've been through a lot. We've done a lot of changes. And then I have a great support system and my friends as well. You know, they've seen me on ups and downs and they've stuck by me the whole way. And so I feel very supported across the board. And even when I was out there, you know, I think the most important thing best advice I could ever give anybody with who has family members or, you know, someone who's struggling with addiction is just to love. If you love that person, that's all you can really do. If you yell at them or tell them to get sober or tell them to stop drinking, that happened to me. And all it made me want to do is drink more and kind of shy away from that person and to run away. But the way to get through and support someone is just being there. And, you know, knowing that I had those people in my life that I could count on is what made me get better.
Are you doing AA or a program or not?
I did AA so the first time I got sober was in LA, and I had the intervention with my family. Came back east for a wedding, and I did had the intervention, went to a rehab facility in Maryland years before I actually lived in Maryland, and it was an experience. And then I went to a sober living house, which was a different experience. And the first time I got sober was not for me. It was for my family. And because I was out of money, I had no jobs, and they essentially supported me through that, which I'm so grateful for. It kind of laid the groundwork, I think, and kind of made me realize what addiction was. But at the time, the first time I got sober, I worked the steps. I didn't think I had a problem. You know, my whole byline during that entire 10 months was that you can be addicted to a substance, but not an addict. And that's what I thought I was. You know, I was just depressed and I found solace in the bottle, and people who, you know, are addicted to cigarettes aren't necessarily addicts. So that's just who I am. So very quickly when I left, I started drinking again. The second time I got sober for me because I realized it was one or two options. I could either die or get better. And I started going to AA for a while after I got sober, but the more I went, first of all, let me just say, I think AA is an amazing organization. And people ask me I'm very vocal on social media, as you know, about my sobriety. And people always ask me, like, not always, but I have people ask me who are, you know, seeking help. How do I get sober? Or how would you make a change in your life? I always direct them to AA. I think the structure is brilliant. It's about giving back, working towards a community, and, you know, helping others, and you learn about yourself. It's reflective. And I think the structure is really brilliant for those people who are trying to put one foot in front of the other and just trying to get back on their feet. For me personally, I don't like to think of myself as living in recovery. You know, I do think that like I said earlier, there's not a monopoly on addiction, and there's a lot of different paths out there. And this is one that just works for me. And for me, I don't have to think about alcohol anymore on a day-to-day basis, which I'm very grateful for. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that that could change at any point. But at this time in my life, I don't have to do that. I don't want to live in that reflective, dark kind of recovery state. I was broken, I was a mess, and I recovered from it. And I moved on. Same way, you break a bone and you heal and you can move on. And again, like I said, I'm aware of the fact that that could change, but for now, that's my truth. And that's kind of why I started this whole Living Recovered campaign, because for me, that's my truth, and that it's what works for me.
You've mentioned several times your family, that you've had the support of your family, which is fantastic. I know you grew up in a religious family. Your father was the pastor of a megachurch in North Carolina. I went to a megachurch in Texas, so I know what that means when I was growing up. But what was that like for you growing up within that world?
It was hard and amazing and challenging all at the same time. I think it built a base for my character, and I do consider myself a good person. The golden rule is something I try and follow. And I'm so grateful that I had those years growing up. Do I think differently than my family does now? Absolutely. I'm, my own person. And I don't know if that would have been the case had I not been a homosexual. So I am grateful for the way everything turned out. Growing up in the church I was actually back there recently, and it was just so bizarre just because I just was a different person, and I remember the first time I was attracted to a guy. I was in 8th grade, and I would say his name, but I'm not going to. And he was walking down the hallway towards me, and I just went, damn. And I was so disgusted with myself. I went to the bathroom and threw up, like literally like vomited. And I was like, what the hell was that? And that really started the suppression and baseline shame of my sexuality for a really long time. And I wasn't comfortable sharing that with anyone, obviously. And for a long time, I thought I would marry a woman, be straight. And then I went to college, and actually it was I remember my first time ever really thinking for myself was as a junior in high school. I was in a world religion class, and the professor at a Bible school, like a Christian high school. And my professor told us about the parable of the 7 blind men and the elephant. And each blind man represents a world religion, and the elephant was God. And he was teaching it to us in a way that was saying that it was incorrect. But I just remember being like, but if we're all blind and we're holding the tail, what we see and feel is true, and that's our way to God, so is the person that's holding the foot. It was like an aha moment. And I just remember raising my hand, asking a question, being like, well, and I said that, and he just kind of was like, no. And my mind literally went from there to, well, maybe, just maybe, if you can believe in Jesus and also, be Hindu and still reach heaven, then maybe, just maybe, I can be a homosexual and it's okay. Like, it was just like that moment. I was like, shh, be quiet, and it went away. And then I went to college, and I met my first boyfriend and fell in love, and the rest was history.
You came out to your family when you were in college. You say that moment changed your life.
Oh yeah. I think anybody who's gay, the moment they come out of the closet is a revelation. And mine wasn't so much a moment. It was more like a progression. I slowly started telling friends, and then more and more found out. And then it wasn't until my family found out actually the night before college graduation. And yeah, as soon as they found out, it was such a relief. Honestly, it was the second biggest relief in my life after putting down alcohol.
How's your relationship today with your family?
It's great. Yeah. It was not the easiest coming out in a Southern conservative family, especially with your dad being a pastor. But it's like now my mom's, my best friend. I call her like once a week, and we talk about it. We talk about boys. And I did not see a life like that from when I came out of the closet, when I was living in there. But I think that it just took time for me to be comfortable with myself, and for also them to see that who I am as a gay man I'm still, still me. And that's not changed. So Yeah, it's great to answer your question.
And have you been able to reconcile being gay with having strong religious beliefs or not having them? Have you been able to reconcile that? Or is that still in process for you?
So that's a great question. I definitely consider myself a spiritual person. I pray, I meditate every day. I believe that there is something out there um, guiding me, and especially the life that I've had and the darkness that I was in and how messed up I was. I don't think it's all by chance. So I definitely consider myself a spiritual person. And I don't like to define that by saying, because I believe this, this is what's going to happen. And I just choose to believe that if I put more good out there, then I'll be okay.
Hmm. I think it's a tough moment in the church right now, of all the religions, trying to reconcile, particularly homosexuality with doctrine, which can seemingly be in conflict. I think the church and religion are trying to find their way through that. It doesn't seem like there's a clear path yet, but I feel like there's a way that it feels like there's a struggle happening, and there's a dialogue happening around this issue in particular, I think.
I agree. And I hope they figure it out. But for now, I'm just content and happy living my life.
You said in your story that you went to live in a sober house in Dallas. You said that it was a nice break, but that you had to leave because it turned out that it was actually a conversion therapy house.
Yeah. So conversion therapy, I wouldn't say it was a conversion therapy house. So I was looking for a place in rehab to go after, my 28 days were up. And there were a couple different options that my family had sent me. All of them were Christian based or in religious based. And I called one or two, and I definitely got like the door slammed on me on a few of them. But the one I ended up going to was a place in Dallas. Honestly, like it was a nice break because it gave me, I just didn't have to think for a while, after I had messed up my life so bad and was in a dark place. I got there, they took my phone away, and I just started working. I started working the steps. I started working on myself. I started working out, and I slowly got like healthy again. Was very clear when I went there that, I am a homosexual and I'm not looking on changing that. And that is part of my identity. And they needed to be okay with that. And they said that they were, and that was fine. And then slowly over my time there, I realized that was not the case. I went to, about like 4 months in, I went to a seminar at a church with a gentleman who was a converted homosexual and was now a straight man with a wife. And he was leading this talk about how it's possible and how it's a sin. And it was just the fact that we were there in the first place. I just was extremely targeted. I actually left the church kind of like crying and was just so angry. Like, why would they do this? And I got frustrated with them. And they ended up pairing me with this older gentleman who was a gay, but was living a life of celibacy because it was a sin. And, I respected him for that. And he was a very nice gentleman, but I, again, just felt this constant pressure from these leaders that were focusing on the wrong thing. I'm here for alcoholism. And I ended up working the steps, going through everything, living there for 9 months. And I just remember we had a graduation ceremony, which is kind of when you go and present to this board of men why you're ready to leave and go back out into the world and contribute. And, I gave them the list of all these things that I had done, and alcohol wasn't referenced once during that entire time. It was all about my sexuality and all about me living in sin, and that Jesus thinks that it's wrong. And it just like struck me as, and it's when you're in it, it's like I was like brainwashed for a while. Like it was like, it just seemed like I was like justifying it, and like it was like normal. And I was like, well, these guys just don't understand. And it took me like getting out of there. And I don't even think I processed it really. Maybe I still haven't, but it took me getting out of there. And I started, obviously within a month I was drinking again, and I don't blame them for that. I think that was still my own issue, but I do think it is frustrating. We spent all this money to be there, and my graduation ceremony from a sober living house, we're not going to talk about my sober life. We're going to talk about my sexuality. That's not why I was in treatment for. And so, it was an interesting experience. We had, meetings with each other. I still talk to some of the guys. But honestly, it's hard to talk to some of the guys too, because it just brings up all these old frustrations and anger I had towards this group of men telling me how to live my life. And it brought up some frustrations I had with the church when, I came out of the closet too. So it was, my dad left organized religion when I was a sophomore, and he's now in mission work. And the way his exit impacted me, it kind of brought up all these old bad memories from that. And kind of, if anything, it kind of just like furthered me more away from organized religion in general. If I believe in God, I talk to him and I have a direct line. I don't need to go through someone else. And that's kind of like what reestablished that for me in my life. When it comes to alcoholism and that experience, I don't know, honestly, if alcohol had been my focus and not my sexuality, if that would have helped. Because I know, looking back at who I was at that time, I was not ready to stop drinking throughout that entire time. And I knew that. So regardless of, I kind of look at it as two separate things. Like, one was my sexuality. And then at the end of the day, when I was sitting in those meetings in AA and I was talking to these other guys that were in my sober house with me with addiction problems, and most of them were there for heroin and opiates. And at the end of the day, in the back of my mind, I knew I was going to drink again, because I didn't think I had a problem. I thought, like I said, I was just depressed. So if anything, it just prolonged how long it took me to get sober. But at the end of it, it's how I got started in hospitality. So I was working as a server at a restaurant, and I remember this woman telling me what to do. And I was 25 at the time. I'd been working in restaurants since I was 15. And she was 22, fresh out of college, no experience, and was telling me what to do. And I was like, I am so much more qualified for this position than you are. Why am I listening to you? And I went up for a promotion that day and got it. And it all coordinated with the end of my stint in the sober living house. And I went up for a promotion, and they offered me 2 promotions. One was to stay in Dallas, Texas, where I was. And the other one was to go to Seattle, Washington. And I was like, I'm going to take the Seattle road. And I did.
You said that even when you were in the sober house in Dallas, or whatever that house was, you knew that you were going to drink again, that you knew that you weren't done with it. And then I think about this time in April of 2017, that you knew that you were done. Why did you know that you were done? And does every addict have to reach that point to where they know that this is the moment?
Yes. To answer your question, every addict has to realize it themselves. And I don't know what specifically changed. I just remember waking up, and I really had no options either. I had quit my job. I had pennies left, and I was forced into this corner, and I could have gone back out and drank more. But I just remember being like, this is it. This is the moment. And I wasn't 100% sure at that time that was it. I actually went home, or I moved. It was not home then, but it went to Baltimore. My brother, who I had spoken to, I talked to him a few days later, and he was like, come live with me. You can stay in my basement. There's this hotel that just opened up here, like a few blocks away. Come here, stay here, get back on your feet, and, stay as long as you want, and I'm incredibly and forever will be grateful to him for that. And I did that. I moved with him, and the two of us went and visited my uncle. We call him my uncle, but he's actually my dad's cousin in Philadelphia, David. And he's been sober for 17 years. He also was, never done AA. He pulled me aside, and we're talking as this like family function's happening. And he says, McCord, there's a moment, and he told me his moment, which I don't want to share because it's his personal story, but he told me that there's a moment in your life when you know, and you just know, and it's done. And I just remember I felt like I got like hit in the stomach. Like I was like, I just remember in that, like, I think that was my moment, because I remember seeing every future glass of red wine with steak, every champagne wine toast, every first date for drinks, any function, any event, any party, any sort of reason for not drinking, like kind of flashed before my eyes. And just this overwhelming sense of peace that was like, it's going to be okay if I don't have those. It was very, I like, it was very physical too. Like I felt it in my stomach and just kind of like heavy, and then relief at the end of the day. Cause I was like, and that's it. And we're done.
And how did you find running in marathons?
So April 3rd, 2017 is my sobriety date. April 3rd, 2017 was alcohol. The next year, I decided to give up cigarettes. So I smoked a lot of cigarettes that first year of sobriety. And I was like, I'm going to let myself have this. And I gave myself 1 year. And the next day I put it down and I started working out. So I started working out I switched one addiction for the other. I worked out regularly. And I remember I was in the Florida Keys at my granddad's place, and I went for a run, and I ran 7 miles, which is at the time was like the longest I'd ever run. And about a month before this, one of my very good friends had run a marathon, and she was like, "You've got to do one with me." And I was like, "Absolutely not. I will never do a marathon. That sounds awful." And in my head, it kind of like stuck with me, and I was running, and I ran 7 miles, and I just was like, I'm going to run a marathon. And I decided to do it. And I signed up for the Baltimore Marathon. It was very important to me that it was Baltimore. There's the big six, Tokyo, Berlin, London, Chicago, Boston, and New York, that everyone was like, run one of those, you have to do it, or do XYZ. Baltimore was kind of where I established myself as the person that I'm becoming. I don't think I'm there yet, but and I wanted to do it there and give back in some capacity to the city that I was at. So in that moment, I decided to run. And Baltimore is not a major marathon, so you can just like sign up and go for it. But I thought it was important that I use this, and I wouldn't necessarily call running a gift, but use this as some sort of platform to kind of get the message out there that you're not alone, and that there's another option for those that are struggling. And so I ran the Baltimore Marathon in 2019, and then I just finished the New York Marathon about 2 weeks ago, and I currently raised about 11,000. So the first one was for a rehab center in Baltimore, which is like a halfway house. It's called Penn North Recovery, and it's a great organization. And then I ran most recently the New York Marathon with the Partnership to End Addiction, and they're all about helping families who are struggling with addiction.
And do you run under your organization, Living Recovered? Is that the run under, or?
Living Recovered is not an organization yet. My best friend Caroline has been trying to get me to turn it into one, and she will, laugh at me for not doing it. But I do have the websites, Caroline, so that's good. But it's not an organization yet. But it's just something that that made sense to me. One of my first posts, I talked about how the reason I'm very vocal and I want to talk about this is because I don't feel like I am living in recovered. I am recovered and I am living. And that's kind of where Living Recovered came from, is because I don't think it has to be a negative. And people ask me, how sad was it? How dark was it? How lonely was it? And I look back on it and I'm just so grateful that it was that bad. And I don't look at addiction as a negative in my life at all. It was for a very long time. But I look at it in a way as, not to sound like cliche, but as a superpower or a gift, if you will. Like, I am hyper-focused, I am intense, I am passionate, and I am dedicated, and I am very driven. And if I focus that and channel it to booze or alcohol, absolutely, it's a curse. But if I focus it and channel those, traits into bettering myself, running, working out, quote, reading, anything, it can be turned into a positive, and it can define my life, but on my terms. It's something that I am, instead of shying away from and running from and being ashamed of, which I did for so long, I have embraced and I've honed and turned into something that I can work towards my advantage. And I'm so grateful for all of that, because I don't know if I would be able to live up to my potential had I not been. I haven't yet, and I don't think I am, and I don't think I ever will, which is why I'm excited about it, because I just got to keep going and thinking about what's the next challenge? What's the next obstacle? What's the next course? Which kind of sounds a little exhausting, but it's also exciting.
I find your story just beautiful and inspiring. It's such an easy word to say. Your story is beautiful and inspiring, but you came through and are coming through on the other side of something. And the fact that you can say that you wouldn't change that because that's your story, that's your journey, that's the thing that makes you you. And you've been able to channel all of that into something positive, I think is even more impactful.
Thank you. I hope so.
I like to ask people because I'm always curious. You've had so many different inflection points and turns within your life. What do you view as that moment that you had to take the greatest leap of faith and step out into the unknown?
Into the Unknown by Idina Menzel just started playing in my head. I can do it. I've had a lot, honestly, even from the first one to moving to LA on like a whim with nothing, and no real direction. So it's exciting, but I guess the most significant move into the unknown, probably be moving to Baltimore, and I wouldn't say unknown. It was more like a shrug almost. At that point, I was so down on my life and not knowing what to do that it wasn't a victorious return to Baltimore. It was more just like a prodigal son, if you will, like coming back and almost and a lot of in a failure. But looking back, had I not done that, I wouldn't be where I am now. I'm with a great company. I just moved to New York, and that's an exciting unknown. But I think, not knowing how things turned out, especially working in hospitality too. When I said I was going back into the industry after being sober for what, like, I think I interviewed with this company I was on April 19th. So it was like, 16 days after I had gotten sober. My family was like, do not work as a server or a bartender in a restaurant. Like, do not do that. You are like asking for trouble. I'm very glad I did not listen to them, even though I probably should have. But for me, it was an unknown that certainly benefited in the long run.
Thank you so much for your time today. I'm truly grateful that you sat down with me today.
Patrick, it was an honor to be asked. I think I said I don't know if I'm successful enough for this interview, but I appreciate you reaching out, and always a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for letting me be here.
Absolutely. And to those of you who are watching and listening, remember, we all have a voice, so use yours wisely. Bye, everyone.